Welcome to Deep in the Valley, a Missouri Valley basketball podcast. I'm Chris Bowser, joined by Brian Duttler, and this is your home for everything happening in across the Valley. On this week's episode, we will start with the news of the week as the Dean of the Valley coaches, Ben Jacobson, departed the UNI for Utah State, and the hiring of Kyle Green as the next head men's basketball coach for the Panthers. We'll recap the 25-26 Valley season, talk a little bit about Arch Madness, touch on the Panthers' trip to the NCAA tournament, and maybe even discuss Illinois State, who will play tonight against Auburn in the NIT Final Four. We may even talk a little bit about some former Valley players participating in the NCAA tournament for other teams, one including in the Final Four. So sit back, relax, grab your favorite beverage. You're in the right place. Let's get deep into the Valley. On tonight's episode, we are thrilled to have two guests who routinely cover the Valley on television broadcasts, Brad Wells and the coach, Kevin Lehman. Our first guest, Brad Wells, is a play-by-play announcer for the ESPN Plus family of networks, MVC Football Conference TV, and a video producer with Around the Corner Productions. Brad, thank you for joining us on Deep in the Valley.
Glad to be with you, Chris.
You bet. Brad, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and your journey from wherever you want to start to your current role in the Valley ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. I'm a UNI grad myself. Went through their broadcast journalism program and started working at a radio station, doing play-by-play for high school sports in Northeast Iowa. And then I got an opportunity to join the video production team at Around the Corner Productions. And with that came covering the University of Northern Iowa for their weekly TV show. And that kind of worked into me doing some radio broadcasts and then some TV broadcasts, and slowly just continued to improve, and then got an opportunity to work with the Missouri Valley Conference on some of their broadcasts. My first broadcast with them was indoor track and field championships, and it was my first ever track and field broadcast, and I still do it. I've done it over 10 years now, but yeah, enjoy covering Missouri Valley Football Conference and Missouri Valley basketball as well. The coaches, the players, the athletes, the sports information directors that we rely on as media members treat us so well and really gracious with their time.
Gosh, thank you so much, Brad. I know that Brian and I feel this way whenever we tune in and Kevin Lehman and Brad Wells are on the call, that we know that we're going to have a good broadcast. And so our second guest is Coach Kevin Lehman. Coach Lehman, you're an Iowa City native, spent 24 years on the bench coaching different college basketball programs, and now you spent time broadcasting games as an analyst in the ESPN family of networks, Missouri Valley, Fox Sports, CBS Sports Network, the Big 12, and more. Coach, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about your journey into your current role.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be on with you guys, Brian and Chris. It's been a while. You were back with us on the staffs at Northern Iowa, but this is my 18th year of broadcasting, and I got my start from another former Panther, Greg McDermott. He took the job at Iowa State. I was just getting the field after leaving coaching. I call myself a retired coach who's now on the other side of the mic, and he gave me an opportunity to the Cyclone Network and cover the Iowa State Cyclones. So that was my first gig with a guy that Brad knows, BJ Shaven. He handed me the mic and said, I said, what do I do? He goes, I'll toss you a softball. Just start talking. And that's how I was trained. But then I stayed on with Fred Hoiberg, and then that led to some work in the ESPN, the Big 12 network, on the Valley and so forth. But my history, I was teaching Caitlin Clark's mother history at Dowling High School, and I got hired by Eldon Miller and made the move to Northern Iowa as a big-time Division I assistant, and took a huge pay cut to make that move from Dowling High School to Pantherland. But I've never regretted it. Kyle Green mentioned that today, that he took a huge pay cut also to go to Northern Iowa as an assistant. So spent 9 years with Eldon Miller, what we call the glory years, the 1990 in-state tournament team, and that big win over the Hawkeyes in the Dome. As you see the picture over my head, 25,000 in the Unidome in that Panther win.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, but Brian and I both had the opportunity to work for you as managers when we were students. And Brian and I talk often about our opportunity to work as managers for Coach Miller, Coach Scares, Coach Boyle, and yourself. Gave us the opportunity to learn the day-to-day operations of a Division I basketball program. And Brian and I have utilized those things in our current careers. On Brian manages golf courses. I work in the Student Affairs Administration at a community college in Springfield, Missouri. But those lessons that we learned, Coach, we really appreciate. You really put a lot of trust in Brian and I running back camps in the summer at UNI too. And so I don't know how wise that was, but they always seem to be okay.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure to have you on talking tonight.
Yeah, the camp stories are endless, and I'm sure putting a foursome out there's much easier, Brian, than putting 6,000 campers through the Unidome in one summer.
Yeah, for sure. The Saturday afternoons are a lot less stressful without 100 teams at team camp. I can promise you that.
Let's talk about the news of the week, boys. One of the dean of Missouri Valley Conference coaches, one of our favorites, Ben Jacobson, has been at UNI for more than 2 decades, makes the decision to move to Utah State. Let's talk a little bit about your opinion on that move, and I'll start with Coach Lehman.
I tell you what, I thought a couple things were in the wind because when that Kansas State job opened, his name was thrown out there, which hadn't been done. So I think, okay, you don't do that unless you have your agent do that. And plus, Hunter Jacobson's son was going to be a senior or is a senior, just graduated. I thought, Coach might be looking to move after 20 years, 25 years, counting those assistant years. And we call him the godfather of the Valley. I think it's a great opportunity because that new Pac-12 is going to have Gonzaga, Oregon State, Washington State, and the top teams on the Mountain West, such as Colorado State, where Ali Frokmanesh is at, and a number of other really good basketball schools like Boise State and so forth. So, and look at that move. I think, okay, the Valley's a one-bid league, and Jake always told me, or rather how you play all season, it's going to come down to March, 3 games. This year was 4 games. I think there's an opportunity there with probably increased NIL money. And that league's probably going to have maybe 3 bids with Gonzaga in there and those other 2 former Pac-12. So I think it's a great move for him. He's 55 years old. If you're going to make the move, this was the window of opportunity to do it.
Thanks, Coach. Brad, what do you think? We'd love to hear your opinion too.
Yeah, looking at the new conference, it certainly gives you a schedule that's going to put that conference in a position to be able to have multiple bids. I was thinking the same thing. We probably talk around our office about, okay, what could the next couple years be? And with Hunter Jacobson being in his senior season this year, we thought, man, anytime in the next few years, if the Panthers put together a couple of good runs, that he would certainly become a hot commodity in the coaching ranks, if not even without that. But then you win the conference tournament. The display that they put on down in St. Louis was absolutely incredible. He mentioned on Monday in the press conference when he met with the local media at Northern Iowa, he said, man, those 3 games, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, some of the best basketball I think I've ever seen at UNI in my 25 years. And you could tell there's a hunger there yet to go win and go chase. And man, I tell you what, he gave so much to the UNI Panther basketball program, and the family certainly deserves the opportunity that he has. And honestly, you just have to be, if you're a Panther fan, you have to be grateful that he stayed, because when you go in 2010 and beat number 1 ranked Kansas and make it to the Sweet 16, you've got opportunities that are knocking on your door. 5 years later, you beat number 1 North Carolina. You got a team that's in the NCAA tournament in 2015, 2016. There's phone calls that are being made towards the coach, towards his agent, and for him and his family to stay at the University of Northern Iowa really speaks volumes. I think about the university, but certainly of Jake as a person as well. He definitely built a family.
And Brian, why don't you weigh in here? Because we talked on our emergency pod the other night about how UNI fans should really be grateful for the consistency and the longevity that they had.
Yeah, absolutely. It came up a little bit in today's conference that we'll get into in a little bit, but just the overall family aspect side of what Coach Jake was able to build off of what Coach Mack had started. And Bowles and I were just former managers, but it's still, to this day, I still ingrained into the program, know what's going on just by the little different things that we do with the alumni and the backers that are a part of the program. For me, Coach Jake has been that conduit to make sure that the former Panthers, whether you were a manager, whether you're a player, whether you're a coach, still felt that we were still part of the program. And that it was a little bit of a shock or surprise on my side getting ready on Monday, but not really. When you have that high quality of an individual that gave so many years to Northern Iowa, it's great to see him have an opportunity to try to do something a little bit different and try to keep winning on his legacy.
Absolutely. And we said it the other night and we'll say it again. We really appreciate everything that Coach Jacobson gave to the UNI program and the Cedar Falls community. But let's turn the page and let's open the Kyle Green era.
I got one thing to say though. You think about this, guys. 9 NCAA tournament bids for Northern Iowa. Jake was involved with 8 of them.
Yeah.
5 as the head coach and 3 as an assistant. So that is quite a legacy that he's left behind.
Yeah. Absolutely. We were talking about that the other day, Coach. I was at SMS when Coach Alford took to the NCAA tournament in '99, and they beat Wisconsin and Tennessee to get to the Sweet 16. In the same time frame, that UNI has been to the NCAA tournament 9 times now. Missouri State's never been back.
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about, being grateful as a fan of a mid-major program, the volume of times that we've been back to the NCAA tournament, and a very good program in Missouri State with a kind of a proud history has not been back since 1999.
And Brad and I see this all the time when we broadcast other teams. The respect by the other, not only the coaches in the league, but the administrators, the athletic directors, the respect for Ben Jacobson was unbelievable. There also was a bit of a fear in there too, Brad. You probably saw that this year. Like, that was the team they did not want to see in Arch Madness, even when the Panthers were struggling at midseason.
Yeah. There was definitely a sense that team was coming together and starting to click, especially late. I know they maybe lost 2 of those last 3, the regular season, made the tournament a little bit more challenging for them. But yeah, it certainly proved to be the team that everybody saw.
I think that's a lot of fun. Brian and I talk about that a lot, like having the 6 seed. It sounds like we're hedging our bets right now, but when the bracket came out, we were like, I love that Illinois State matchup, a team that has beaten us twice, but I don't think we played very well against. And so we were excited to see that. And of course, you got to get past Evansville first. And they always make it an adventure. But then we were excited to see Illinois State on Friday night. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. So let's shift gears and talk about the press conference was today. Coach Lehman, I think you were there. Let's open with you and talk about the Kyle Green era and kind of how you saw the press conference going today.
Yeah, Brad was there doing a number of interviews with Coach Green and other people with Around the Corner production. I think you saw the emotion in his voice. A number of times he had to compose himself when he talked about AJ's journey there and the fact that I think he's come back. This is the 4th time. So he stepped away, but he also talked what Brian hit upon about the family atmosphere and how much people like Greg McDermott meant to his career and how to build those relationships, which Northern Iowa basketball does a great job of doing that. And then also what Coach Jake did to him as far as giving him the leeway to be an assistant and be able to run that part of the program. Because Brad and I see this all the time. You go into Coach Jake's practices on game day, he's sitting on the sideline. His assistants are one's running the defense, one's running the offense, because 80% of that practice prep is done by his assistants. So he has great autonomy and giving those coaches the long leash. And that's a great learning ability to do that. So I think all it's going to pay off with Kyle Green. The challenge now is, and I asked him that question because it's a different era than this here 5 years ago, because the portal and the NILs become such a big factor now. So there's different challenges he's going to face that he didn't face when he was an assistant. But I think this school is ready to make that next step. And because now it comes down to, can you keep your players? Because Jake was always a developmental program.
Yep.
Keep guys in your program, redshirt them, keep them 4 years. And even during this era of portal, he was still keeping the core and the culture and adding pieces through the portal, such as a Tristan Smith. So I think that's the formula that they did at Iowa State under TJ Otzelberger, that Kyle Green can bring that here to Northern Iowa, because to put your teams together now, it's different than it was years ago when we were there coaching. It's a whole different ball game. And it's that next step is he's got to hire staff. And I'm sure he's got a list of guys that he's reaching out to that. And there are going to be a number of guys that are part of the Panther family that understand the culture and what it's like to live in Cedar Falls, to attend University of Northern Iowa, to get a degree there, and the pride that people have that wear the purple.
That's awesome, Coach. Brad, you were there today too. So can we maybe talk about your experience at the press conference and the things that you learned today from Kyle Green?
Yeah, and I've gotten to know Kyle over the years as well. He was part of that Sweet 16 team, and I remember going to St. Louis and shooting highlights from the sideline. I remember being on there under the hoop when Paul Jesperson hit that half-court shot, and being in the locker room after both those games down in Oklahoma City. And I've gotten to know Kyle. He's obviously a really friendly guy. Anybody that's traveling with the team, he's going to make sure he brings them into the family. I had not seen that emotional side of him before. He was always the one that would crack a joke to make sure that things stayed light and never got too serious. But you could really tell how much care and love he has for this UNI basketball program and what it means to him. I know having a daughter that plays at UNI, having a son that plays at UNI, every time somebody asked him about his wife, his son, or his daughter, or even his son's jersey being up in the rafters, you're going to be coaching underneath your son's jersey. He just choked up, and it has to be a huge week. He just had a crazy week. This all comes together so quickly. But man, I love it. It gets me fired up because He's just got so much care. He's going to put his best foot forward and do all that he can for this UNI Panther basketball program. So I thought it was an awesome press conference, and man, I'm really excited for KG to get it going.
That's awesome. Mr. Duttler,
Yeah.
you talked a little bit about maybe building a staff. I know one of your things is data analysis. So have you looked across the landscape of former UNI players to think about maybe who would be good folks to add to that staff?
I did. Surprisingly enough, I haven't done it on the assistant side yet, Miles, but going back to his press conference a little bit, a couple words that came to my mind was, we talked a little bit on the Filled with Gratitude. That guy was emotional from the start, and he was so thankful finally that, not necessarily finally, but this is his opportunity to show that what he can do, not only in the coaching profession, but what he can do for the Cedar Valley, for Cedar Falls, and for Northern Iowa. Although he's been an important part of what the legacy's been, now it's his turn to run with it. The competitiveness and the selflessness that ties into kind of the common traits that we see of Northern Iowa successful teams. They're doing it for everybody else. They're not doing it for themselves. And the other side is, even with the NIL and things along those lines, we're still going to be a foundational program that's built for Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin kids. That is the core of where we've been. That's the core of our successful teams. And I think KG understands that, and him bringing that up in the press conference was something that really got my ears perked. Like, we have a different leader, but the tenets are going to be pretty much the same with what we've been used to for the last 25, 30 years.
That even goes back to Coach, to your time in Cedar Falls, the Brian Carpenters, Jay Sims, Jason Daisies of the world that came in from those programs in the Twin Cities and were a staple of the Panthers in the mid-90s.
Chris, I'll tell you, it worked out really good because our core, was like Brian was talking about, was get the Iowa guys. And interesting enough, when we beat Iowa in 1990 and went to the NCAA tournament that year too, we thought that would help us get more Iowa kids. It actually reversed because Tom Davis, we beat that team with 11 players on the roster from the state of Iowa. They started recruiting the guys that we were making a living off of. So it actually got more difficult after that, which we thought would become easier. But my point I was trying to get to is, we just started KB was handling that Chicago area. So we were looking for, as Eldon said, we need to find guys that can win games the last 10 seconds, the Randy Blockers of the world.
Oh.
So we started looking into the Twin Cities in St. Louis. Dale Turner comes out of St. Louis. And luckily enough, we played Missouri in the first round, which is St. Louis, Missouri. It was perfect for my recruiting footprint. In the second round, we have Minnesota, and we're just getting into that area. And therefore, the guys you mentioned that were really stalwarts that got that started. And Kyle Green, all those kids that came out of Tartan High School up there, he was really grabbed that and ran with it. And actually, I think Jason Daisy is related to him by marriage somehow. So he had his big footprints into that AU program in Minnesota. And also, I first got to know Kyle when he's the assistant at Augustana when I was the head coach at Omaha, and they recruited that area too. So to Brian's point, that footprint probably is going to change, and maybe they'll get back in that even a little more heavier. And because when I went recruit the Minneapolis area, we didn't have to worry about the Gophers. They were always looking for something bigger. Wisconsin was a team I had to battle all the time to get players out of there. It was interesting dynamic. Now, I'm sure it's changed. That's a long time ago. But to Brian's point, I think you're going to see that footprint that we've seen in the past with those successful teams.
That's awesome. Any final thoughts today on the beginning of the Kyle Green era before we switch gears and recap the 25-26 season?
But what I just mentioned, I think it'd be interesting to see who puts together a staff, because you can look, the coaching tree from Northern Iowa is tremendous. Look at Greg McDermott's coaching tree. That is unbelievable. You guys got like Brooks McGowan, Robbie Siebert, and you guys are all head coaches that could come back into here, and guys that understand the culture and what it takes to win. So I'm really excited to see how he puts his staff together.
Me too. Brad, any thoughts?
Yeah, my final thought is I was really impressed with really the UNI administration being able to get Kyle Green. I know I had talked to a couple dozen people. It's pretty easy to come up with a list of, here's 5 home run hires. Here's a list of 10. Hey, that would be a pretty good fit. And Kyle Green, he was always number one at the list. And honestly, a lot of people are like, do you think we could get him? He obviously got a ton of praise for what he did with his defense at Iowa State over the last 5 years, and the fingerprints that he has on that Iowa State defense that was just one of the most feared defenses in the entire country. It says a lot about the program, and I think it says a lot about what UNI means to him, for him to walk away from that and get this head coaching job here.
All right, let's talk 25-26. It was a really interesting year in the Valley. The preseason polls, Illinois State, I believe, was the preseason conference favorite. UNI was number 2. Belmont, who ended up winning the regular season, was down at 4 or 5. Let's just go through. Coach, let's start with you and just talk a little bit about maybe what defined the Valley for you this year from preseason conference all the way to the end of the regular season.
Those preseason polls are getting more and more difficult because of the Portland. I usually don't put a lot of stock in the rosters. I try to do a Valley tour about late October or mid-October to see all these new faces. It helps me so much in the broadcasting. But when I do my preseason poll, I used to vote by coaches because Ben Jacobson's always going to be in the top 3 or 4. Brian Wardle Bradley's going to be up in the top 3 or 4. Casey Alexander, who's now gone, I always penciled those in the top 4 too. Those were squads that were going to be there. I think what made this year so interesting is the fact that you had the resurgence of UIC under Rob Eason. And of course, we saw him in the championship game. He did a great job there with a whole new team. And then also what we're seeing out of Valpo with Roger Powell, his ability to take freshmen. He's recruited some top-notch guys. Can he keep them? I thought those two teams they elevated the entire league because they were so competitive. Along with those coaches that we've talked to that have been there and been successful in Belmont. And Ryan Peden, I tell you, talk to Ryan Peden, he modeled at Illinois State, his roster and his style of play after Ben Jacobson. When he looked at it, he said, that's what I want to do as far as culture, style of play, and it's worked well at fourth year. They're playing, as you mentioned, in that NIT championship tonight.
Yep. And so I think that I'm going to maybe piggyback on what you said. When you look at from Bradley all the way down to Valparaiso, there's only 2 games separate those schools. Bradley, UIC, Illinois State, Murray, the Panthers, and Valpo are only separated by 2 games. And then Southern's only 1 game behind there. So you had more than half the league sitting at 10-10 or better. And so I think you're right. I think the middle and the bottom of the league were elevated this year. And so that I just wanted to piggyback on that. Brad, what are your thoughts on maybe from preseason poll to the end of the regular season?
Yeah, I thought there was a ton of parity. I think it was early January game that Kevin and I were working together, and we were maybe 3 games into the conference schedule, and we get done with the game in the McLeod Center, and Kevin looks at me. I think our regular season champ's going to have 4 losses or 5 losses or 6 losses. There's no way somebody goes through this conference and only has 3 losses at the end of the regular season. And Belmont wins it at 16-4. They had a ton of close games as well. And then you talk about that parity from 2 all the way down to 8. Just absolutely incredible. I thought the level of play was excellent this year. Every year there's transfers that leave and everybody thinks, oh, the conference is going to be down. The conference is going to be down. I don't know that it was, right? Like, it's tougher for these teams to get schedules. It's still tough for these teams to get schedules, right? Even with losing some of their top kids to Power 5 schools that they're just able to pay a little bit more money. But yeah, to Kevin's point, the coaches are excellent. There's 4 or 5 coaches that are always going to be in the top half or battling for the top half. And honestly, coaches that finish in the bottom half of the conference, man, I tell you what, they have a couple games go the opposite direction and they're right there. Their programs are right there in that same boat as well. It was a lot of fun to watch this year. And yeah, from start to finish, it went through that regular. That's not always a regular this year, right? We had, okay, here's a team that's a favorite, right? Murray State just started rolling. And then it's like, they're the team to beat. And then Belmont comes up with some wins. They're the team to beat. Bradley goes on a run and a string, and the Panthers start to finish the season a little bit stronger. People are talking about them. Illinois State, Bradley, they all had their runs, and UIC just kept winning games as well. Yeah, it was certainly fun to watch.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on a couple of things that you guys said. With Brian and I, during our broadcast at Arch Madness, we were the Roger Powell Fan Appreciation Club, right? Because we're like, how does this guy continue to just recruit phenomenal incoming freshmen? And our thing was, gosh, if that guy could just keep a couple of those kids and then add to his roster and then have a roster of 4 or 5 just really quality players, man, Valpo could shoot up into the top 3 or 4 of the league every year. And so that was my observation, is hopefully he can keep a couple and then bring more to continue to elevate the Valley. Mr. Duttler, any thoughts on the season?
Yeah. So to take a go on this one, I did do a little research for you, Bows, on the number side of things, and just looking at net numbers, right? I've got the net numbers from the 15th of December. So basically right before conference play hits off, you've got 4 teams that were in the top 100, right? You got Belmont, Murray, Illinois State, and UNI. With today's net, we have 3, which is Belmont, UNI, and Illinois State. But the interesting thing, you guys talked on a little bit about UIC and Valpo, where they were at in December versus where they're at today. UIC jumped up 103 spots. They went from, they were 213 now to 110. And then Valpo, they were at 224, and currently they're sitting at 156. So you've got a 68 spot improvement out of Valpo. You've got a 103 spot improvement on UIC. And UIC, once the calendar hit January, they were on. That team was fun to watch. They were exciting. They played great defense, offense. They could get the ball in the hole. And then you take a look, and there's 8 teams in the Valley right now that are in the top 50 of the net. Now, we know that's just a tool, but kind of overall talks a little bit about the strength of the league. That middle was a little bit better than it has been in years past. It made for exciting games in close games that no matter when you turn on the TV, you were going to watch a pretty good Valley game against 2 competitive teams.
Absolutely. So let's shift our attention to Arch Madness. Arch Madness this year, March 5th through Sunday, March 8th. Brian and I would routinely call this our Super Bowl. That I have attended every Valley tournament since 1992 -1. I have only missed one, whether it be on the bench as a manager. I volunteered at the tournament for a long time. And then Brian and I have been going as fans for a long time now. So we get to the Enterprise Center on Thursday, March 5th. And I think one of the stories that we need to talk about, even though they struggled in the regular season, but our other in-state school, the Drake Bulldogs, really started off like a house of fire and won 3 games in a row as well. Coach Lehman, you want to talk a little bit about maybe what you saw out of the Bulldogs down in St. Louis?
I recruited Eric Henderson when I was in Omaha, not well enough. He went to Wayne State just up the road for Coach Mack, and I think I know that my first win was over Mack. I don't ever let him forget that. I'm 3-3 against Mack. But Eric Henderson probably beat me 2 or 3 times, but just a great young man. And he's a guy that wasn't a great scorer, but he affected winning in so many ways. So I thought that was an excellent hire by Drake. And they lost 9 in a row walking into Arch Madness. For him to get that team focused and play the level they did, I thought was just an amazing job. If you know him, though, he's a former elementary school principal. He is the most positive person you'll ever be around. And that glass is always half full. So I was so happy for him to make that, to get his team playing well in that tournament. And to Belmont's demise, but Belmont, we saw some signs when they went to Illinois State that last game of the season and lost that things weren't all clicking for that Belmont team, who I thought was good enough to win games in the NCAA tournament. They were so talented, and the coaching job that they did when their point guard went down, they played basically without a true point guard from that Southern Illinois game, January 4th on. But yeah, I thought Drake and their ability to score points, but it wasn't like they made a shot at the end to beat Belmont. They dominated the entire game. And I think that might have been a TV game I was calling. You could see it in the face of Belmont with about 14 minutes left. We're not going to catch these dudes. We can't get them. You can see the body language. Like, whoa, we just ran into a buzzsaw we're not prepared for. So that was a great opening night I guess that was a second round game for the Valley.
Hey, Coach, can I ask you a question regarding the Drake and the Belmont matchup? Because obviously Drake got him the last game. But the first 2 games, even though Drake got beat, they were extremely competitive and had pretty big leads in both of those games. Can you maybe explain a little bit about how, as far as the matchup goes, what was Drake able to contain, or be able to positively do to put Belmont in the position that they were in?
If we watched our Duke UConn game. You get the one in a tournament like that where it's one game. It's not a 7-game series. Every possession is so precious. And if you have a bad possession, we saw it happen to Duke. It's like, okay, we're still up 15, no problem. That team makes a 3, all of a sudden it's that margin, and it gives new life. We saw that. I think Drake came out of the gate so fast. And the thing about Belmont, they're a team that plays with rhythm and pace. If you can take them out of that and disrupt them, they sometimes will struggle. Drake made them play half-court offense and really did some things defensively to them that took them out of their rhythm and their ability to revert. They like to play, like I call sideline to sideline, and stretch you out. And then that opened up the middle for what their short rolls and so forth. And Drake took those things away from it. But Drake was so good at the offensive end, putting offensive pressure on that Belmont could not get any rhythm because of Drake's offense. Allows you to set your defense. That ball goes through the hoop. It does two things for you. It gives you some excitement on defense because you're scoring, but also it lets you get your 5 guys back and what I call the loaded defense, because we know in the Valley, the other team will call out your plays for you. It is so well scouted. And this is a side note. Murray State, whole new staff, they were shocked of the physicality of the Missouri Valley Conference. From every coach, I got that from those guys at Murray State. Wow, we know this. We knew this league was good. We didn't know it was this good, this well coached, this well scouted. And the big point was so physical. So what are they going to do? They're going to go get some bigger guards now with their NIL money.
Good deal. Mr. Wells, Drake at Arch Madness.
My thoughts on Kevin. Every time he brings up, I recruited this guy. I feel like I'm the only guy in the Midwest he didn't recruit. Like, I really feel like there's this, he's got a pulse on everybody. I never once popped up on the radar, but
That's because Ben McCullum was beating you down.
yeah, that's true. I did not look good on the days I played against Ben McCullum. That's for sure. Now, with this Drake team, I was curious how they were going to come into the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. You and I thumped them the last game of the year pretty hard. They lost a couple games the last 3 weeks by significant margins. I was curious to see what they were going to be able to bring down to St. Louis. And I was really excited for Coach Hendo when he got that win over Southern Illinois. I thought, man, good for him. He was a great guy. I got to cover a couple of his games. And yeah, Coach is right on the energy. I asked him in the middle of his shoot around, he came over. I said, Coach, are you always this high energy, or is this just what this team needs this year? He's, oh no, I'm an elementary teacher. It's all energy all the time, baby. From when I wake up to when I go to bed, I'm going 100 miles an hour. So that's what he brought. So I was glad that he got a win against Southern Illinois. Now, that win against Belmont, man, that was an eye-opener to put up 100 points against a Bruins team down in Arch Madness. When going into that whole tournament, the Bruins were certainly the favorite to win that and get to the NCAA tournament. But that's the beauty of March right there. So yeah, Drake put together a great game plan. It was disciplined. They got to the free throw line a lot. They knocked down some shots and had some big performances. Jalen Quinn, man, that's a kid that can score right there. And Owen Larson had a real nice game down there in St. Louis as well. So that was certainly fun to watch. And I think for Bulldog fans too, that might have been a little concerned, oh man, what's happening this season? That's a great way to finish. That's going to give you some momentum going into next year.
That's what I thought too, Brian. That's actually a great segue, Brian. I was going to ask of your opinion then, what is the way that Drake ended the season, maybe positively send them off into the summer, and then looking towards 26, 27.
Yeah, I think when you have a chance to right the ship a little bit, and that's exactly what they were able to do down in St. Louis with both those wins. With Jalen Quinn was outstanding. He averaged just short of 20 points, I think, for the entire season. You look at him on a game-by-game basis, he was fun to watch. And that momentum can do a lot. Drake, as we've seen the last, 4, 5, 6 years, it's been rebuild, whether it's programs, whether it's coaches, whatever it's been, but it's for the positives. Maybe they can get a little look out of this as saying, we may lose some people to NIL, but the strong core is going to be back. And that's going to be a lot to be able to build upon with the experience that they were able to finish the season with. And I think Drake's in a good position, not knowing what's going to happen here in the next month, but in a pretty good position to take advantage of to get the season started off well in 26, 27.
I think so too. So we're still at Arch Madness, but let's focus on the UNI Panthers. They started on Thursday, late game, 8:30 against Evansville. Coach Lehman, I don't know if you were on TV or radio for that one, but can you talk a little bit about how UNI started their 4 wins in 4 days journey against the Aces?
That one was a little ugly. That one was a little bit clunky. But I tell you what Ben Jason did. This is the stroke of Coach Jake. I had that last loss against Illinois State, and they lost to Southern Illinois right before that. And you guys know my son, Grant, the G-man. I had a flight from Des Moines to St. Louis, and when they got beat by Southern Illinois State, he said, Dad, canceled. I'm not going because I can't stand to watch them get beat in Arch Madness. He's been known to walk out a few games before halftime if they're not playing well. But back to my point, though, UConn made that run in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the player that went crazy for him? I can't think of right now. But
Was it Ben Gordon?
No. But anyway, what Jake did after those losses to Southern and Illinois State, because that was the UConn team who made the run to the Big East and won that, and then made the run into the NCAA tournament. he showed him tape of that 2011 game. Who's it?
Kemba Walker.
Kemba Walker. He showed him that tape. And then this is the stroke of genius. And he looked at me and said, why not us? And I thought, boy, that what a great way to put it in perspective for guys who probably don't know who Kemba Walker is or never saw him play, but to set that type of example, because even Kyle Green talked about today, like Coach Jake it's always, why not? Why can't we succeed? Why can't we win this? So I thought his ability to get that team in the right frame of mind to win 4 games in 4 days. And they came out the next 3 days, guys, you saw that. They came out house on fire. They got up early. There was no slow starts. And the Saturday and Sunday games, I'm doing radio. So Coach Jake's like standing right in front of me. I've never seen him that animated to start a game to get his team to play fast. Because he told Brad and I all year, as soon as we get healthy, get RJ Taylor back, broken hand, we get these guys back. Weisbrod was out with mono. We're going to play faster, but I can't because I got 1 point guard, no backup. Ben Schweiger's my backup point guard. He told us all year, didn't he, Brad, that we're going to play faster, we're going to play faster. And he always, okay, sure, coach, because you're a defense. Your shingle says defense, buddy. But they certainly did in that tournament. It was unbelievable. I think their points per possession that first half of one of those games, it was like 1.5 points per possession. And he used to always tell me defensively, they want to hold a team under 1 point per possession. That was their goal. And his old coach at North Dakota, Rich Glass, said, you do that, you're going to win 95% of your games. So for them to be that productive at the offensive end, because we know how good they are defensively, because I said all season, if they have offensive lapses, their defense is good enough to carry them through those offensive lapses. Boy, they got their offense going, and the defense good as it was. Some of those defenses, like Brad and I would say, you could put this on a coaching clinic on how to defend and rotate and help and recover and cover up the middle and baseline rotation it was clinical what they did during the season. They had great size on the perimeter too. When they went with the big lineup with Bond as the 2 guard, Schweiger as the 3, that was a team that took away a lot of your space. Their run was, I think, one that may never be repeated. We didn't think it was ever going to happen, and it may never happen again to win 4 games in 4 days. And what the game was late Thursday night. It was 5:30. Then you had the 11 o'clock start, and you lost an hour Sunday. Yeah, and I know Coach Jake never mentioned that to him about not being tired. Don't bring that up, man. It's like telling a guy who misses free throws, don't miss the next one. Don't plant that seed. But I thought it was one of the best coaching jobs I've seen from Ben Jacobson, minus those 2 that Brad mentioned over #1 teams, Kansas, North Carolina. Those were pretty good too.
We were after the tournament. I saw, I don't know which media outlet had it, but they had a camera on the huddle before you and I ran out for the championship game. And RJ Taylor said, 4 games in 4 days. There's a lot of worse things we could be doing right now. And so I was like, what a phenomenal attitude. And I thought the same thing. Not one of those kids in that area was talking about being tired or focused. They were just jazzed up to be there, and they had the right mindset, and they had the right mindset from Thursday night. You're 100% right. I'm looking at the scores now, but by the way, Brian and I probably didn't feel like they were this far apart as we were sitting in the stands because we're both nervous, but they beat Illinois State by 18, Bradley by 4, and then they win the championship game by 15. And so if you've ever sat by our group at the Valley tournament, you know that we play a game called Guess the Score. And we have a sheet that we try to guess the total score at every media timeout. And you talk about pace of play, coach. And so you could see early in the tournament that all of our guys were picking lower pace of play, total points, but semifinals and championship game, we had already adjusted and started picking higher per bracket, a 4-minute time spot. But that's a great way to say it, is that just we came out with a pace of play that I think maybe caught all 4 teams that we played by surprise. Brad?
The team I was concerned about, Chris, was not so much Illinois State. Like you said, I knew they'd lost twice, but Bradley was a team I was concerned about when I saw the initial matchup, because Brian Worrell, we've got the Godfather, we've got Sonny there, the second in command. He does such a great job with that team that he's the ability to make adjustments, and he's had great success against Golden Iowa in those situations. I thought back to that was the 2019 game when they scored 6 points in 1 possession. Bradley was always, and he's much like Coach Jake. Their teams get better, and Bradley was always playing their best basketball when they went to St. Louis.
Absolutely. You never want to show up. It's kind of like Tiger Woods with his red shirt back in the day on Sundays. You never want to coach or play against Coach Wardle when he brings out the ruby red slippers.
Yeah.
Brad?
Yeah, for you and I, man, I know on Thursday, Evansville hits a bunch of threes that first half, and they're just always a team that in the regular season seems like they have you and I's numbers. So it makes you nervous, but you escape that, and then you come back on Friday and 18 or 20-point win against Illinois State. And you saw Belmont get knocked out earlier in the day. You start to think, all right, if we can get past Bradley, then it's just one more game, and you're in that tournament mode where it's like, we just have to beat them once. And you had a number of different guys. The stars just continued to step up. Trey Campbell obviously had a phenomenal tournament. Leon Bond had a couple of great games, right, against Illinois State. I think he had 19, maybe in both the Illinois State and the Bradley game, if I'm not mistaken. And you had Will Hornstead. He was pretty steady. Tristan Smith. Everybody was playing their role exactly how you thought that they could, and they certainly maximized their opportunities down there in St. Louis and cut down the nets down there for the Panthers in the first time in a while.
Hey, we got to mention this one, though, guys. How about RJ Taylor?
I was just going to say that.
Coming to shine, 4 for 4. Is that the Bradley game?
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep a kid like that, it was to get his confidence up to play that well in the tournament was another big factor because they need some bench points, and he's certainly. And I talked to Brian Jones, assistant Bradley, goes, RJ just broke our backs when we started hitting those threes.
Yeah. Agreed. We nicknamed him during the tournament RJ Taylor. That's how he played. He played like an obligatory Panther growl the entire tournament. So we cut down the nets, and then Selection Sunday comes out. We're matched up against St. John's. I would tell you my opinion would be is that St. John's was underseeded, both Big East regular season and postseason conference champions. But let's talk about the matchup, guys. Let's start with you this time, Brad. What did you think about the matchup? And then maybe talk a little bit about your opinion of how the game played out.
Yeah, certainly. I started to think, okay, this is what Bill Self felt like when he was facing a UNI Panther team that was a 9 seed. Like, if that's a 9 seed, holy cow, you got to be kidding me. Yeah, for St. John's to be a 5 seed, that was shocking. I think they came out and played with a chip on their shoulder for that one. Certainly not the start that Panther fans were hoping for. And I like how the Panthers continued to fight, made some adjustments. I think in that second half, I think they got it all the way down to, was it 12 or 13 points? Yep. I don't think they ever got it to single digits, but yeah, continued to fight all the way down the stretch there. And just was certainly a team, I think Coach addressed it. This Panther team, certainly a team capable of winning an NCAA tournament team, but St. John's, a team that a lot of people picked as a possible upset to try and get to the Elite Eight or the Final Four. And their defense, man, I tell you what, that was long and that was aggressive. For sure.
Coach Lehman?
Concerned. I thought it was UIC on steroids.
Right?
Athletes that gave Panthers problems.
Valley fans think about that St. John's roster.
Yep. Yeah, and the big guy in the middle I knew was going to be a problem. But I thought Tristan Smith, they would use him to break it was a man-to-man pressure. And I'll say this about their coach, Rick Pitino. I'm not a fan of his because of what's happened off the court, but that dude can coach X and O's better than anybody in the country. And as Brad said, you see them as a 5. Whoa, wait a minute, man. That team has not been seeded correctly. They've lost one time since January 1st, that game at UConn. So I just thought it was a bad matchup. I was thinking, geez, maybe Jeff Jackson shouldn't have politicked so hard to get you and I a 12 seed and then better off as a 13 seed. Right? They would have got that matchup. But in the back of my mind, though, I actually got Chris and Brian, you're going to this. I'm on that chat deal with Pace and all those 1990, Paul Peter, all those guys from Turner, all those guys from that. And I still have the 1990 warm-up. I put that baby on, took a picture and sent it to those guys. Said, we're going to get one here, boys. We're going to get one. But even that warm-up couldn't pull one out for the Panthers.
Yeah. You got to put that warm-up away because you had it at the Southern Illinois home game, and we lost that one too.
Yeah, that's right. That Eric Braley, that was Brad's cohort. So you got to wear that thing.
That's exactly. Stop wearing that at game.
I also wore it against Michigan State that.
See?
16 game. Yeah. You're right. I think that thing's 0-3 now.
Most superstitious people that you'll ever meet. And so we would now it's time to put that thing away.
Yeah, it sounds like it needs to go to a museum for sure.
Hey guys, let's talk about Coach Peden and the Illinois State Redbirds really quick. We have to give them credit. They have really been a buzzsaw through the NIT. They opened up on, let's see what day that was, Wednesday, March 18th, with a 21-point victory over Kent State. And then let's see here. They moved on and
Wake Forest.
Wake Forest on the road, and then Dayton as well. And they here in about an hour, they'll take on Auburn. Coach Lehman, talk a little bit about maybe Coach Peden and their run through the NIT.
I had the first NIT game, Dayton at Bradley. And that was like a cat playing with their food. Dayton was so talented. They made that nice run. They were a little bit like Northern Iowa. They had some injuries mid-season, but they got healthy. They beat St. Louis in the A-10 and then lost to VCU. It was the only team they couldn't beat. VCU beat them 3 times, but they came in and just plowed. They had no problem with Bradley. So when Illinois State, and I text Coach Pete and I said, that was a great win because that Dayton Flyer team was really talented. But I had Illinois State a number of times. I saw the best and the worst out of them. I had their, what they call the Warren 74, where Bradley came to town. Oh, they beat Bradley like 25. Unbelievable, their performance. And then I had the clunker where Northern Iowa came to town. It was 24-16 at half.
Mm-hmm.
We were getting hit by shards of glass there at the broadcast table. It was such a rock fight. But when they got clicked, I think Ty Pinster has really come on strong from the NIT, and they got the pieces that fit with Chase Walker in the middle, a big man that can pass and can score, do a lot of things. And of course, Landon Wolf has really redefined his game with a 3-point shooter. Now he was scoring inside for him, became their de facto 4-man. But the key to that team is Johnny Kinzinger. When he plays well, they win games. And he's a little bit undersized, but boy, he's a tough kid. And in Skunberg, they got some depth in that team. And as Ryan Peden told me, his model was Northern Iowa defensively and the culture they set. So I'm really happy to see it has success. And I think a lot of those guys are back. Skunberg graduates, but Pence is an underclassman. Johnny Kinzinger is a junior, Chase Walker, junior. So that could be a loaded team again next year if you can keep those pieces in place.
I think so too. Coach Wells, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought Illinois State finished the regular season really well. I know they got upset by the Panthers in their first game at Arch Madness, but they beat Murray State, UNI, and Belmont in their last 4 games. Their only loss in that stretch was to Bradley in Peoria, the game that Coach talked about. They were a team that was playing well, and they ran into a UNI Panther team that was clicking and rolling down in St. Louis. I give them a lot of credit to be able to go refine the juice, get refocused, and go out there. And looking at the scores, I haven't been able to catch any of the games. They're certainly playing some really good basketball here through the month of March. And when you're playing games in April, you got to tip the cap to your team for being able to go out there and execute and perform.
You bet. And I will say this, I want to thank both of you guys so much for joining us tonight. This is our first official broadcast of Deep in the Valley. Brian and I anticipate that we are going to talk all year long about Valley basketball, and we're going to try to have a cast of characters that come on and make this really entertaining. And we hope that we can get you guys to come on multiple times. A couple of the things that Brian and I want to talk about over the summer is deconstructing and constructing Valley rosters in the NIL and the portal era. And we just want to talk a little bit then maybe about how do we beat the net, right? Because I do believe that the Valley back in the day figured out a way to manipulate the RPI. And so is there a way that Valley schools can manipulate the net and get multiple schools into that, say, top 45 to 55 range, right? Where they could be in the conversation for at-larges. But that being said, we want to thank you guys. Are there any final thoughts before we wrap it up tonight?
That multiple bid, Jeff Jackson, the commissioner, he's for expansion of the in-state tournament because he feels that they add those extra teams that at Indiana State from 2 years ago would be in it. Belmont wouldn't have faded at the end. There would be a team that would be in it. Most of us think that's going to be more middling teams like out of those power conferences will get bids. But boy, if you get 1 or 2, I think the A-10, the Valley, those are teams that are really going to benefit. The American Conference, those 3 leagues will really benefit with expansion. I know a lot of people are against it. It'd be interesting to see how that folds out too, and how the structure of college sports changes. There has to be something that restricts this easy movement of players because their ability to hop from school to school. You can't do that in any pro league that we've seen. So hopefully they'll put some parameters around that, and that will slow that process down and help the league like the Valley get multiple bids in the future.
I agree. Brian, thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. The method of the Valley was it's been get old and stay old, right? And that was back in the days of being able to get the multiple bids. Now with the introduction of NIL, there's a lot of those Power Four teams that have bought in, that they truly bought the formula of getting old and staying old year after year. And you're gonna see that and come up in the next couple of years as well. But I agree with Coach, limit in some sort of way to construct these rosters so you do have a little bit of flow, but yet at the same time, you do have some of your core people able to come back and provide teams of, especially with mid-major, the opportunity to advance. I'd like to see the tournament expand. I really have no appetite for watching Auburn playing it this year. I can promise.
Yeah.
You. And that's what you get, right? You do have some deserving teams. And I think the conference, with the expansion of the Pac-12, the West Coast is going to lose their 2 to 3 bids that they've been accustomed to. So there's a few more probably that you're probably looking at them back to a 1 bid late. If we expand it, or if you don't, there's another possible way, possibly the Valley moving up into a little bit higher pecking order when it comes to the conference alignment as well, even if no changes are made.
Even also, to your point, Brian, Mountain West, they got ready for Pac-12. Yep. So that league's going to bounce down a little bit too. And in a future one, Chris, we got to talk about the quad system because what that's done for scheduling.
Yep.
When you guys were there in Northern Iowa, we were playing home and homes with Nebraska, with Iowa and Iowa State. So those days are gone. So your scheduling model has to change. And I think Coach Jake was getting his arms around here the last couple of years, the way that he scheduled. We can talk about that at a later date.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead, Brad. And
yeah, for me, final thought is going to build off what Brian was saying too. And it's actually maybe something I learned from Coach Lehman. There's certainly some X's and O's, but it also comes down to Jimmy and Joe's. This UNI Panther team, they were old. They had some upperclassmen. They had 7, 8 guys that were seniors that graduated. Some of them had been there from the very start. You think of Trey Campbell, a couple other guys had been in the program for 2, 3 years. You find sometimes you just have a program, if you can build it, if you need to get 1 or 2 transfers in that could be that X factor type of a player, then you're going to be in a great spot to go on a postseason run and have a great season. So it's certainly fun to watch teams build their rosters over the course of the year.
You bet. And we're going to break it down all summer long and then try to roll right into season previews. And then we'll be covering games all week, all season long in 26, 27. So that's going to be a wrap on the 25, 26 recap episode of Deep in the Valley. We appreciate everyone spending some time this week with us talking Valley basketball. If you enjoyed the show, please share, subscribe, and follow along as we cover everything Valley basketball all year long, from Cedar Falls to Des Moines, Nashville to Normal, Carbondale to Chicago. This is a league rich in college basketball history and programs that have made a lasting impact on the sport. We'll be here every week to tell those stories. For our guests, Brad Wells, Kevin Lehman, and co-host Brian Duttler, I'm Chris Bowser. We'll see you next time, Deep in the Valley.